Okay, it's all very well to learn how to draw, but what's it like to actually work in the comics industry? Our guest artist this evening is a veteran illustrator of comics going back to the 80s. He's best known for comics like The Boys, Fairest, and now Where Monsters Dwell with Garth Ennis. Please welcome our mentoring guest artist, the multi-talented Mr. Russ Braun. Have a seat, Russ. Thank you. So, Russ, you're one of the best artists I know. You're one of the least known. You don't even have a Wikipedia page. What the heck?
I just draw. I mean, that part's not up to me, it's up to you guys.
So someone's got to work on a Wikipedia page for Russ right now.
Oh, I guess you have to.
So a lot of artists, I find, lean on photographs, or you can kind of see it in their work and they fudge around things they don't know how to draw. You, on the other hand, you seem to be able to draw everything very sort of fluidly and confidently. How did you get to that stage?
Well, it's really just from drawing a lot. To start out, I like drawing out of my head best anyway. I used to hate using reference because I thought if I can't imagine it, why do I want to draw it? Otherwise, it's just, why don't I take a picture? But as I got to be drawing more and more comics, you need to have reference for certain things like cars, buildings, animals to a degree. I mean, you can start making things up, but it's only once you've put enough of the information into your head, like filling a database. So, yeah, I mean, I'll use reference when it's called for, but I prefer not to because it's faster, honestly.
Right. Do you use things like SketchUp or something like that, or have you tried?
No, I don't even know what that is, actually. Sorry.
We tend to find, I'm looking at your work, and I know that you come from an animation background.
Yeah.
And there's people like Juanjo Garnido or Cyril Pedrosa who are also Disney animators who have come to comics, right. And they have that sort of fluidity to them. Oh. Is there a school in Disney where they teach you that?
No, I started with comics. I went to Disney as an internship. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, Disney came late for me. It started all with comics. And in fact, what comics drawing did for me was help me be more fluid with my work for Disney. Mm-hmm. At Disney, I did mostly cleanup work, which is basically like the inking aspect of comics. So right. I, luckily, with my background, was happy to be put on some of the most complex characters they had because they realized I could handle the complicated stuff. So
that makes you more flexible, the fact that you're such a confident draftsman, yeah. You can be put to different tasks.
I guess so, yeah. The problem with Disney was always just speed. You had to get a certain amount of drawings done per day. I worked on the traditional animation movies from Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, Tarzan, all the way up through Brother Bear, and they closed the studio down in Orlando. So
is that why you went into comics?
That's why I got back into comics. I started in comics in the 89, 90. And I left comics mostly because the work had dried up to a degree, and I'd hit a wall. So there is a chance that, first of all, you can get into comics, which is great, if you can get into what you love to do. You can also get back into it. There are second chances in this business. I came back from Disney, and I had no work at all. I mean, I had some money saved from Disney, but I said, let me get back into comics, which is what I really love anyway. And getting new work in comics at that time, this is about 2004, was very difficult. And I still knew people who were editors, so I would check with them, but I was never very good about pushing for work. I liked it when they would call me. So
it's always very flattering, isn't it?
I had to make it that way again. So I started slowly again and rebuilt a career.
To go back to the start, because you've had some really heavyweight mentors.
Oh, yeah.
You studied at the School of Visual Arts here in New York.
Yeah.
Under Joe Orlando, who, if anyone knows, is a real serious heavyweight of the industry, really influential figure. You were also inked by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, which I am totally envious of, because he's one of the key artists of his generation.
Yeah.
How does that? I mean, were you a keen student of these guys? Were you listening?
Oh yeah. In fact, well, I'll get back to Jose because Jose actually has taught me how to do comics more than anybody else in just very simple ways. But I went to SVA. And I had Joe Orlando as a teacher. I'd met Joe before from high school. He lived in the town I was from, and I needed someone to write a recommendation for me to get into School of Visual Arts. And Joe said he would be happy to look at my work, and if he liked it, he would write a recommendation. So I went up there, and he was looking through the work very quietly for a while, but then he started to smile and shake his head and was very pleased. And so he said, no, everything's great. And he told me this story about, he said, the last guy who came up here to show me his work, I wasn't as complimentary to him. And the way he put it was, he said, how did you get here? And the guy said, I drove. And he said, Do you pump your own gas? He said, yeah. You ever think about doing that for a career? And so that was the critique that he had before I got there. So he was very happy to see my work, was very pleased, and said, when you get to SVA, take my class. And of course I did. And from that point on, I ended up working with Joe. He called me up and said, let's get something done, let's do some work. And,
it seems like the tough critics are the ones everyone remembers.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to get really good,
sure.
really objective advice.
I've never had a
informed.
critique that bad.
Right.
And I think that's probably the worst I might have ever heard.
Is that why you're still in comics? The fact that you can bounce back from that means your ego can handle it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so the first project I worked on was called Ford Fairlane, and it was an Andrew Dice Clay movie. So we did a prequel to that. I was just hired to do the designs, the style guide for the book, really. They had a regular set of artists on that. The problem is the artist left halfway through the project, so they said, hey, you want to try and be the penciler? And I said, sure, Joe, I'll give it a try. That's what I said. My answer to everything was, sure, I'll give it a try. And we had so little time that what they did was they hired a layout guy, because I didn't know anything about storytelling at the time. And the layout guy was Carmine Infantino, so who I'd never met before and heard, intimidating guy. And nicest guy in the world, taught me so much. I worked right over Carmine. We did an incredible amount of work in a very short amount of time. Yeah. And again, that's how I started learning. Yeah. But friendliest guy, nicest guy in the world. We did 2 issues together, which ended up being about, I think they were 25 pages or 32 pages each. And we had to do them in a very short turnaround. Mm-hmm. They were inked by Don Heck and Frank Springer. So the first project I ever worked on were 4 like major heavyweights of comics when I was growing up. Then I ended up working on Batman, and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez inked that, and just to see what he did with what I gave him, and sit down with him in the offices every once in a while, it was remarkable to see what he added to what I had already put in there. And plus, any inker can always just, well, it's not my fault, I'll just do what he did. It's a terrible drawing, and I'll just ink it that way. But
it's a great inker that can actually make it better.
Make it better, and what he did was teach me what I could fix, what I could change. It's a very, very simple little thing that he calls incidental detail that I wasn't doing. I was drawing the perspective properly, drawing the characters properly, but the environments never felt realistic. There was no texture to anything. There was no life to it. So the perspective is perfect, but it looks like they're standing in a shoebox. There's no, everything is perfectly on perspective, on the proper points, and on the right horizon line, but nothing is tilted at an angle. Right. There's nothing on the walls. Do these people really live in this building? So,
is that where you got your tip from, the tilting the angles?
Somewhat, yeah. But just like if the chairs are all lined up, it looks fake somehow. Yeah. If one chair is slightly off kilter, it looks more realistic, you know? So little things like that. He put a calendar on the wall in one scene, and a couple of beer cans on the floor of like these thugs, and it just made the whole scene just suddenly come to life. It's like, this is real. This isn't just a bunch of lines on paper.
Just hints of information, just little bits of like describing where they are.
Exactly, as he called it, incidental detail, which, and the way he said it was incidental detail. Perfect. And I've done it ever since. So I not to go into big details with that, but it's like I do come up with backstories for things. I'm not like a method actor with my drawing. Right. But you want to know, like this thing where Garth, I'll bring him up early, but we'll talk about him later. But in Garth's scripts, sometimes there are 2 main characters talking, but the other characters are in the shot. So he doesn't bother telling you what those characters are doing. You have to just kind of figure out how would that character be reacting to the scene. So if you're thinking like that, you're thinking like a comic artist. So
it's also like an actor, because a lot of times actors are standing around in shot but not necessarily doing anything, so they have to work out what to do without intruding or
I'm totally
staging.
method. Yeah, I'm a method comic artist. So
actually, I've got to say, I don't buy very much original comic art because I've got so much of the stuff lying around. Right. But I actually bought a page of yours, one of your pages from Fairest, which is a beautiful pencil page. I just saw it and it was absolutely gorgeous. And that was shot from pencil and then colored from there?
Right, well, I do all my own work in pencil. My process is strange. I work in a sketchbook because it's the most free for me. I do a thumbnail on the page when I get the script, and then I draw each panel separately in a sketchbook, just not even the panel itself, just the poses, the expressions. I scan that all in the computer, And then out of the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 drawings, I'll build the layout. So I can tilt things around, zoom in, zoom out where I want to. And then I print that out to size, put it on the light box, and I do my final is my pencil, like a final
So final
pencil
ink,
drawing.
pencil ink, basically,
yeah.
yes.
So, and basically learned that from working at Disney as far as like the cleanup was so precise to get we do an ink line with a pencil for cleanup.
Yep.
Ink gets the most perfect lines, but it's also unforgiving. So
Yeah.
and I've never been great with ink, so that's what I use for my finish. So what you have is the finished
Yes,
page,
yeah.
but I'll shoot that, then I'll scan that, and I do my final stage in Photoshop, where I basically make everything black just with levels, and fill in blacks and do a little white out. And
You find there's an awful lot of like cleaning up in Photoshop. It
yes,
can get
quite
a little bit
bit.
obsessive.
Yeah.
So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can keep getting smaller. It's zooming in smaller and smaller
drive
until
yourself crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found quite a flow with it, and it seems to be working for me as far as just getting
Do
things
you
done.
experiment very much? I mean, do you get time to do that?
I do, usually between projects. I try and experiment with something every time I'm working on a project too, some new aspect of something I'm doing. But where I've been doing most of my experimenting these days is on drawings I do for Facebook. I do my
I've been
Facebook
watching
page.
that. You should follow him
and,
on Facebook because he puts drawings up every other day.
I do an image a day. Some of it's old stuff, some of it's new stuff, and but each time I try and I've had a long day of work. It's nighttime, and I realize I have to have something up for tomorrow morning. So I'll do exactly that. I'll experiment with something. I hadn't used an ink brush in a long time, and I just started playing around with that. And
It's something to remember when you're a professional and you're working all the time. It's like to remember to draw for fun.
yeah,
Because it's easy just to it's a job and you get lost in that.
and I've got to say, Facebook, the thing that I actually love about Facebook is that brought that back to me. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do after drawing, trying to draw 2 pages a day sometimes to get to meet the deadline, is I know, let's draw. So, but then I found myself doing it and enjoying it. I could have said, I could find an old drawing from a Batman book or whatever and put that up, but no, I had an idea for something tonight, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw that. Or someone's birthday is tomorrow and they love Doctor Who, so I ended up doing a Doctor Who drawing for somebody. So
That's
not
good.
to bite off your...
No, please, I'm not the only one doing it.
Yeah.
You've spent a long time working with Garth Ennis, one writer. Is that, I mean, that's obviously a close relationship, you're friends.
Yes.
Does that
yes.
help? Does that make it more easy, more
It
intuitive?
does. It didn't at first. At first I was concerned about that because he was my friend first. I met him back in the 90s when he was coming over to do conventions, and got to know him and Steve Dillon. And so we said, we should work together sometime, that would be great. And, but more just because we were friends. Then when it came to the time now to actually do some work together, he asked me, do you want to do this?
Right.
And I was a little bit concerned. I said, because if I don't do a good job, I'm letting my friend down. So one thing, and plus it's Garth Ennis. I mean, he's Garth Ennis, my friend, but in comics he's like Garth Ennis, So I managed to do some, again, with the computer, I'd send him the layouts that I did. And when he seemed happy with that,
Does he give much
I
feedback?
knew it.
Did he give you much information?
He does. Every time I do a page, I send it to Garth. Garth sends back. He's very hands-on with it, and
That's good.
So it's perfect. But the tricky one was the first thing we did together was a thing called Battlefields. It was a World War II story, and it was the Night Witches, which is a true story of these Russian bomber pilots that were all women. They flew these crappy little PO-2 biplanes and dropped bombs almost by hand on the German lines. So. It was a great project to be a part of. It was a fascinating story. And then right when I was finishing that up, I did another one after that. And then The Boys was having trouble with deadlines. So he said, would you do me a favor and would you want to do an arc on The Boys? And I said, no. Because it was my favorite thing he was working on at the time.
Yeah.
And it was intimidating to come in and try and do. But I said, it's just one arc, 4 issues. We need to give the main artist a break. The co-creator, Derek Robertson, he had so many other commitments at the time that it was just getting hard for him to be consistent with getting the things in.
He's a tremendously fast artist. He seems to be able to do so much in such a short time.
Remarkable. So they called me in. The deadline was very tight again to start with. So I jumped in, and I had no chance to really get my feet wet with it. I did 2 or 3 quick drawings of Butcher, and I butchered them. They were terrible. And I said, I can't do this. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this.
Right.
And then I did one drawing of Butcher, just a profile shot of him, kind of looking up with a smirk. And I said, I got it. So I got the character with one drawing, and by almost becoming the character, I was able to do it. The confidence. Butcher, the character from The Boys, if any of you have read it, is kind of the ringleader of the whole thing, and he's always one step ahead of everybody. So.
So you find yourself putting yourself in that headspace and becoming that character.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. One last question. You and I spend a lot of time sitting at a drawing board, doing not very much exercise, and my doctor tells me that's bad. How do you keep some kind of health?
You didn't know this because I stand. I don't.
Really?
I don't sit.
Really?
I have a stool. I sit on this crappy little stool. I've never had a really comfortable chair at my drawing table. But I prefer to stand because also as I work on the light box, I like to look over it. Even when the light box isn't on, I like the surface of it. But generally speaking, I stand when I'm drawing. I'll sit down for the bottom of the page, the top of the page.
Relax into the
So yeah, and then when I'm done with that aspect of it, I'm getting up to go to the computer or getting up to go to the scanner. So I do move around a little bit more than other comic artists. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Russ, thank you very much. This has been fascinating. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Sure. Thanks.